I believe that humans are looking for that sense of connection and sense of belonging. That's why all of us are drawn to this community, or the idea of having a group of like-minded people that can understand you, that can grow with you, that can evolve with you. As a community, we should be able to champion and still get more conversations like this, even if it's uncomfortable or sometimes very sensitive. And I feel that this would drive us forward. My role is a facilitator in this lifetime. And I think I think I enjoy doing this a lot more.
Welcome to Before We Get There, the podcast where we explore people's journeys, how they got to where they are, what keeps them pushing forward, and where they eventually want to get to. I'm your host, Nicholas Braman, and today I'm joined by Vivian Lim. Vivian is a community builder for TEDx Singapore and her equality and inclusivity project, Gen. We talked about her philosophy on communities, the differences she's seen in Singaporean ideas compared to others around the region, how she works with people doing amazing things to platform their work, her long-term vision of success and continuous personal growth, and much more. Enjoy the show. Hi, Vivian. Thanks so much for being here with me today.
Hi.
Good to see you. So I'm really excited to talk to you. And what I wanted to start off with, because one of the phrases that you have in your LinkedIn profile is community builder. And I've known you for a couple of years now and been working with you on different projects. But this concept of community, I think I never really thought about much before. So I'd like to start with asking you about what community means to you.
Yeah, I'm going to start off with the most difficult question. I think community, the word itself, it's elusive. I think in today's age, everybody wants for communities. I think the essence of it all is all of us. I believe that humans are looking for that sense of connection and sense of belonging. That's why all of us are drawn to this community, or the idea of having a group of like-minded people that can understand you, that can grow with you, that can evolve with you. For me, I think my concept or my understanding of community has also changed. It evolved over the years. It fascinates me. That's why I'm so enthusiastic about after a decade of trying to build communities. And I think one of the most recent things that I use to describe community is like an organism, which means that it will evolve and grow into a manner that even sometimes you get a little uncomfortable with, because it's something that's not familiar. But I feel that that's the beauty of it. And that's what makes it so fascinating. And as I said, elusive, right? It has its sense of growth. It's made up of communities, are made up of people, which is why sometimes it's intimate, it's distant, and you really don't know what it will evolve to become. Like, for example, TEDx Singapore, when I started my journey doing TEDx programs, I never imagined meeting people that are so diverse and seeing it evolve to where it's at now. And all of us in the team bring a part of us, and we pull a part of us into this organism. And I think this is the magic that sort of forms, and it would just continue growing this way. And I think one of the ultimate goal that I would want to, or at least in the recent years, is like I hope to one day be able to say, oh, this is totally not what I have imagined a community would look like. And I think that's what makes a community.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put it about organically. And I think one thing that I've noticed over the past couple of years is that because, for example, TEDx is volunteer based, there are a lot of changes constantly about who's participating and supporting. What are some of the challenges that you've had to deal with that about keeping like continuity or being able to sustain the community with people rotating or having other things going on in their lives?
I'm a firm believer that cultures cannot be taught, but it has to be caught. And I think we've built this very unique culture within TEDx. And my TEDx friends, our contemporaries across the region, If you belong to the TEDx family, they will understand. It's ever evolving. It's totally ground up. And that's why we're the world's largest grassroots organization that's sourcing for ideas, world spreading, or how ideas can change the world. And such culture really needs to be caught. And I think that's been one challenge. First, especially coming from Singapore, I think our education system has done really well in teaching structures. But as you would know, for our teams, everything is highly open. Everything is a flat hierarchy. There's no such thing as hierarchy. We practice open circles. We are like the open organization, like we had or the holacracy models on Zappos, which means all of us volunteers included take responsibility and agency over something that we want to champion for. And I think that has been the challenge because when new volunteers come into the team, they're like, oh, give me instructions. And you're like, no, pick a pet project or something that you're passionate about, give it voice, and then give it life. Encourage that sense of co-creation alongside with our volunteers. And I think there has been a challenge in just trying to ease people to understand this is what a ground up movement would look like. This is what a grassroots organization, and this is what co-creating with a community looks like. So that's been quite refreshing as we see cohorts of new volunteers come in and feeling, oh, I'm lost, what's going on. And then they get a sense of, they find a footing as time goes, or when, as you said, they rotate across different portfolios, projects, and roles.
Yeah, so maybe we can go back to the beginning, and can you share about how you first got involved with TEDx?
So the origin story is not that it's not that special. Honestly, I was a student in NTU. My background is like super geeky. I was a mechanical engineering student in NTU, and back then I'm just a geek, right? So I watch, consume TED Talks a lot. In my dormitory, we're always watching TED Talks, especially because that was a platform for new technologies. I think Microsoft, the HoloLens was launched on the TED stage back then as well. There was so many crazy engineering stuff that were on the TED stage. And I remember hiding in the library, watching live streams in the middle of the night just to catch up on TED newest, latest like videos. And I think that was how it started. I found like-minded people, and this is how our communities started. So I found a bunch of equally geeky PhD students in NTU, also who are fans of the tech community or the tech ideas. And from there, we thought, hey, if they can do it from Silicon Valley or from US, back then I believe it was California, can we also look in all the labs in NTU and see what we can uncover? Because all our profs are just geeky and creating incredible science in their lives. So I really wanted this. I found this group of them, my friends, my colleagues, my comrades in this whole TEDx ecosystem. They said, hey, let's try and build a TEDx NTU community. So that was a start. It opened up a whole world for me as a student, because I was just an undergrad student. So being exposed, having the opportunity to really knock on every single door in school and ask them like, hey, what's a crazy idea you work on? What's a new innovation that you're recently obsessed with? And then starting to even go into social science faculties and asking them about and joining them for debates and philosophies. So that opened up this entire world for me to feel that, hey, actually, my worldview is only so small, and it can only be so small if I'm going to stay within what I know. It then took me the next step, and the next step. And that's how I never left.
Oh, so it's been, I think, almost 15 years, right, since you started that at NTU. Has there ever been a time when like you wanted to give up? Like, there's so many moving parts and different aspects to keeping the community going, from putting on events to getting volunteers to getting funding to finding speakers to getting people to attend and participate. And that's a really long time, and so many different different types of activities and community engagement and all those things that you're doing. Was there ever like a point where it's, I don't think that I'm gonna be able to make this work this time, we're gonna have to skip this one or cancel it or anything like that?
I think that's on every single year basis. We question that, right? Well, I was just like, oh, wow, another year. In fact, one of our team just questioned me last week and said, Vivian, are you going to do this until you retire? And I was like, yeah, haven't thought about it. Yeah, because that would be challenges, and there have been. We are a not-for-profit. That means that we have to hustle very hard for funding. And also, we are also community facing, which means we have deliverables, right? We need to be accountable for our community. And the basis of it, we are like a media team, which means that all of our volunteers know, we put ourselves at very, very high standards in the kind of content that we want out there. So all these are stressors. We make sure very unique. We're not just like a social fun group. There are responsibility, intrinsic responsibility as being part of the community that our teams have been trying to do. And then that is challenging. It's tough. It's like running, it's like holding another role in office. But I think going back to the why, and of course, that's everybody's one of the top favorite talks of all teams, Simon Sinek's Start With Why. I think the voice as a why has always been that strong. And that is being part of a community that knows more than myself. So I think from a personal standpoint, it has always been this that drives me. And I can't imagine not what would I be doing. And I think for me as a team, if I see it from a team's perspective, it is something that there's this collective interest and there's this shared purpose or collective optimism when our teams come together and say, hey, no matter what that news is out there, we are always motivated, for lack of better words, having this shared purpose of trying to uncover ideas out there that are trying to better our world. So I think with this sense of collective optimism, it helps us stay forward. It makes it less tiring. It makes the realities of running the team, it makes P&L less stressful when we take a step back and really just see how, whether it's the speakers that we work with or whether it's our volunteers, they start to realize that, oh, I have a voice. So I think all these does put things into perspective and say, hey, the realities are going to be there. But if we take a step back and see what we are contributing to our world, yeah, so if we weigh this, and I think that has been for me. So every time, I feel a bit tiring, a bit strange, and then I pause and see, no, our volunteers are so optimistic, right? Or our speakers are so optimistic, or our community that comes to us post-event and say, I never knew that we had such a story out there. Thank you for putting it out there to the world. And I think these keeps me going. Yeah, these things, all these little things keep going.
So that brings up another question I had, which is when you are organizing events like this in the way that you platform speakers and facilitate the community, you are a bit behind the scenes, and the stars of the show are usually the speakers. Do you ever feel like, yeah, I know that it's part of the, as you said, the why is to seek out these stories and find people that are doing interesting things. But do you ever feel like, oh, if I was the one who was doing something else, that I could have progressed or had a different path or a different journey than being the one to be the facilitator and the organizer behind it?
I don't think that we all play very different roles in our time on Earth or in this lifetime. And I think it's just somewhat in that I am subscribed to the thought that it is my role is a facilitator in this lifetime. And I think the whole I think I enjoy doing this a lot more. And I think it's also it's recognizing that in all across the decade of my work has been the room is always the smartest and not one single voice. And I think it's probably a personal philosophy more than anything else, where I feel like, wow, there's so many more exciting ideas out there. And I'm just very happy and gladly facilitating such conversation and seeing that grow and blossom more than wanting to be an expert in one of them. I think it's just a personal philosophy. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So you've gone beyond TEDx now, and you've also started some other projects. Maybe can you share about Gen?
Sure. Gen, it is an extension actually of a community that we've built although yes, TEDx Singapore, it is that singular brand that sort of brought people together, brought our teams together. But across that experience of meeting people, Gen was one of the pet projects or babies that was born out of it. So Debia, my co-founder, and I, we acquainted through running TEDx events and projects together. And we always feel like there needs to be a voice for diversity, equity, and inclusion from an Asian standpoint. So it's almost like a pet project or a research lab that we've developed, all championed by passion and a lot more other people now compared to 8 years ago when we started. And one of the core principles is, can we talk about DEI? Can we talk about intergenerational stories? What are the stories that we want to leave behind, especially from an Asian viewpoint? Because Asian voices and Asian narratives, we feel very important in today's context. And what's been exciting is that not just doing the talks or panels, we have dabbled into children's education. So we took many of the nuggets of wisdom that we have researched, the values that our generation of parents wants to pass on to the next generation, and have developed them into bite-sized stories, children's literature for kids. And that has been a fascinating experience because we get to interact with parents, with children. Yeah, so it's an ongoing project. To be honest, just like how my journey with TEDx and communities are, we're not sure where's the end point or the end outcome, but we are pretty much trying to focus on the journey of how we're getting there and just taking that time to explore. These are the different opportunities. And one of the things that we tried dabbling with, which is new to our team, was another unique way of storytelling. So instead of using just the usual talks, verbal communication, or visual communications, sketches, illustrations, we work with a theater company to do theatric storytelling for young children. So that was a whole new experience for us. And frankly, it's not things that we would have experienced in a full-time job, to be able to just like trial and error, like your wildest ideas and any creative input. So yeah, that's what Jen is doing right now.
That's really cool. Yeah, I really like the illustrations and the first book that you did. So with these various projects and communities, do you feel that there's an underlying mission or theme that is driving everything that you are working on? Or is it just when something catches your focus or you find a reason behind doing a particular thing that you just go with that?
I think the central purpose and my perspective of why communities are still important in however shape and form is that we are or our generation is presented with this opportunity to have very different conversation because of the resources and access to resources that all of us have right now. And we are very well positioned to rebuild a community that's typed by shared identity and vision. We see all these new things are getting increasingly polarized. Of course, the whole pandemic has shifted how humans interact. There's just so much wild and crazy right now. And I think we're slowly losing the sense of who we are as humankind. So I feel that when we bring communities together, it does present opportunities for us to rethink, relook, and discuss and table such things. Just yesterday, our team worked with HTA, Hospice Care, to amplify the stories of caregivers. And in that conversation, in that whole session in the salon, it was very interesting because it was a difficult conversation and less glamorous, a bit dark and gloomy, because it's about end of life and in the hospice setting. But it made me realize that, hey, as a community, we should be able to champion and see if we had more conversations like this, even if it's uncomfortable or sometimes very sensitive. And I feel that this would drive us forward, whether or not is it just bringing people to relook, rethink, or just anchor themselves again to see what human connections all mean. So I think this is what has been on my mind a lot when it comes to what do we want to achieve in building communities, which is why I say earlier as well, it is an organism. We're not doing events just to have this feel good placebo effect of, oh yeah, I went to a cool show. But I think when we're trying to put forward and whether it's expanding knowledge to the world, contributing to knowledge? Or is it reenacting a new conversation that needs to take place? Or is it just bringing people that would have never met in their circles together to explore like possibilities? I think this is where we're at. And I think this is what we should be thinking when it comes to communities of the future.
That's really interesting. Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't attend last night, but it sounds like it was a very impactful talk that would be good to hear. So I wanted to ask, you have all these different projects going on. How do you keep everything balanced? How do you stay organized and keep everything moving forward?
Yeah, it is. I think when I was in my 20s, it was all about hustling. I think, especially this year, has been super reflective on me on my end, on a personal level, going through many different things. And I look back, for me, I think we go through just as how our communities evolve and grow. I feel that our own personal journeys are the same as well. So when I look back, when I started TEDx NTU and TEDx Singapore, I was in my 20s. And that means hustling, right? Whatever opportunities, whatever excitement, it's like any shiny objects, right? And go for it. And I think that was 100% of my 20s. And then just burning and every single fuel I have for things that I'm passionate about and things that excite me. I think when I started in my 30s, I think it is then really focusing on the big rocks, or I'm still in my journey in trying to make that work. And it's not a perfect journey at this point, but it's understanding then we only have limited time. Age is catching up. So what will be most important and what do I want to prioritize? So one thing that very practical because engineer. So one thing that I use to balance is of course tools. And I think with the help of AI tools now, I think that's been very helpful in trying to coordinate, organize things to balance everything together. And I think compartmentalizing also becomes very critical because my life has always been very fluid in terms of my work life, volunteer life is one. There's no breaks in between. There's no different compartments. And I think in my 30s right now, it's trying to understand where do the lines creep in and how do we balance it all so that it's so that it can be sustainable, so that my energy can be better fueled back to the community to give back, to contribute back. And I think it only hit in the last 2 years a lot harder, than previously.
That's an interesting point. So I'd like to talk more about, because you obviously have worked closely together with so many interesting people doing really cool things across Southeast Asia, but especially in Singapore. Have you noticed any themes or maybe ways of thinking or speaking or learning or sharing that cut across a majority of the people doing these things that you've platformed?
See, I think in general, I feel, and I'm not sure why as well, I feel that for many of our Singaporean or Singapore-based ideas, we still tend to be a bit safe. We still tend to be a little bit more in the box. And I don't know why, there's nothing wrong with that. But and I'm only saying this because as compared to if we do a comparison across our contemporaries across Southeast Asia, we do take that stance of being a little bit more cautious and a little bit more correct. And maybe take an example. So during COVID, Singapore, our team championed the regional campaign called Imagine Next. So there was this collective spirit amongst 5 cities in Southeast Asia, namely Manila, Bangkok, KL, Indonesia, Jakarta, and Singapore. And we have this collective vision. Hey, pandemic, lockdown, right? So what are our communities imagining next? All of us had to come back with a sort of ideas of imagine next. It was fascinating because of course Singapore came back with a very, very same answer. Singapore was imagining impact. So I say, what's the impact that Singapore want to create? And that has been the true line, right, of whether we talk about social impact, organizations, social impact, teams, that has been going around in Singapore. But just sharing, so for Thailand, they came back with imagination. And that was because Thailand was on the cusp of the whole military regime. And the whole political overhaul, and it is still going on. But their youth there, or their communities there were like, oh, imagine, we were talking about imagine the nation as we see. It's like there was a bit more space in the way we think about our impact and contributions to the world as compared to our contemporaries. So I feel there has been something that, that our teams or our events have been trying to move the needle on, because I don't believe that that is all we have. We've seen, and especially because, I worked in last year's program, right? We have uncovered gems that we didn't even know would have existed. And our communities came to us and saying, "What? I didn't know such a story of a drag queen, of a drag artist, or a community library, of typesetting prints, right, exist." So I feel that it's there. Maybe it's just because we're not accustomed to talking about it as openly, in whether it's it public spaces or whether is it just out of habitual or just culturally. So I feel that that's been something that I observed. Like for Singapore ideas and stories, we really need to be on the ground, be in the nooks and crannies.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So I think that's one of the things that was first drew me into continuing to wanting to be involved with TEDx in this community, is seeing all of the really interesting stories and the cool things people were doing at the first event I was involved with. And like you mentioned, I think sometimes these people and these stories are not heard about widely, even in such a small country city as Singapore. And so it's really refreshing and new to people to draw these stories out and be able to share them with other people. And what you mentioned about Singaporeans, or maybe the kind of way that people in Singapore look at things or the ideas they come up with being a bit more safe or practical and not necessarily as the same as in other places around the region. Do you think that's changed at all over the years? Have you seen it shift? Or is it because, like you mentioned, last year we had opera? There are these creative and very people that are not like in the mold of being very safe and practical, but have you seen that change over the years, or is it very steady and staying the same?
Definitely changed. And also because Singapore is only 60 years old compared to Indonesia's culture and heritage. And I think every city and country had their own historical background, and whether it's a cultural awakening or for their citizens awakening towards different topics and issues to find their place and their voice as a nation. And I think Singapore, I like to be a bit more optimistic about it. Just I started out saying it's about collective optimism. Right? We see it as well, right? Probably 10 years ago, the talks that we platform, the questions that our teams would be asking our speakers were very different.
That's great. I also wanted to ask you, because you've worked with a lot of quite well-known, famous people who are very accomplished in their careers and their lives. Do you ever feel nervous or like you are not up to being able to, it's not your place to help guide or coach these speakers on their talks or tell them, oh, this isn't quite right, or I think we can do better, when there's somebody who's very accomplished and prestigious?
I think we get away because we do stand for a brand that is known to be very good at storytelling. And I think ultimately, there's a few folks that we have worked with that, of course, have a very prolific backgrounds. And I think getting that buy-in from them to let them understand where I come from, that's usually how I start the conversation. I'm not discounting you as a domain knowledge expert, but I'm coming from a point of view of you want your story to be told to everyone online. You want your story to have a legacy online. And especially in the digital space, you want longevity of your ideas. And that the storytelling becomes expert catch that everywhere when I go into discussions like that. And I think that helps when they feel like, oh, you're not personal attacking their content and saying that, oh, this line needs to be taken up from your script because it shouldn't be because I'm smarter than you. But it's just because from a comms perspective, we know our audience, we know our community the best. And of course, as I work with many of such speakers, in fact, all our speakers, we usually go in with more than one speaker coach and they see. Actually, no, speaker coaches, like our teams, we work with them through even how they present themselves on stage, what parts of their talks they should emphasize on.
Yeah, from my experience, it's a very collaborative process, and the speakers, they want guidance as much as they want to be able to tell their story, because I think that at least the ones that I worked with were very open to feedback, and they wanted to hear our opinions. And especially for yourself, having worked on so many talks over the years, you can definitely provide some valuable feedback for them on where to optimize their script and their their talk. So that also just brought up another question in my mind, because the world is getting increasingly noisy. We have so many channels and places where people are blasting content, and everybody's a content creator now. And we're just like filled to the brim with people talking to us, and videos, short form videos, long form videos, podcasts, events, talks, all these kinds of different things. So how do you think that you're able to work with the community to create content that rises above the noise and keeps people engaged and makes it unique and valuable compared to everything else that's out there?
I think that were a few things. I think one thing is, yes, we can't stay away from, especially the TikTok content that's taking over everybody's attention span. But I think for us at least, it's coming back to what our community wants to hear. And I think we do that through not just being myopic and looking at speakers on that dimension, but we also listen to whether it's partners, community, on topics that they have been curious about. So it has always been two-pronged. We used to run a lot of community ideation sessions where we invite just anybody in the community to ask questions. I remember there was a few, we should probably run that for this year. We'll bring communities in and just have the four walls, whiteboards, or the flip chart papers and ask them, actually, what are you curious about this year? What questions do you have, burning questions do you have in your mind? And then our community, our team, our volunteers would just it's like a verbal like breakdown, right? And then they would just write down all the questions that they have. And then as a team, we'll reverse engineer and go back and, okay, if these are the top burning questions, who can answer these questions? And that's how we begin our speaker process or searching for ideas process. So it has always been, yes, discovering gems from the ground, but also taking a watchful eye on what does the community that we serve want to hear about? What would our community be curious about? And it's built up from there. So I think as long as we're not chasing just purely view count or viral done, I think we're fine. I really think we're fine. But one thing that we've also evolved to do more is not just stick to a very one directional kind of download of information. And that's something that maybe we don't talk about enough. Like last year, we did Adventures. So Adventures are series that you don't just sit in a room to listen. When our community, a very small group of community, because manpower, our limited resources are brought out to experience something in person with our speakers. For example, Chia Johari, he's a food historian. So he spoke on our stage talking about the whole Nusantara history of Malay cuisine. And after his talk, the next morning at 7 a.m., we all gathered at Geylang Serai Market with a bunch of our audience community and did a walk through Geylang Serai Market, experiencing what he spoke about. We got to taste the vegetables, smell all the different scents that he was talking about, and even eat, right, at Geylang Serai Market. Like these kind of experiences are things that the whole social media craze can never take away from. And that's what our teams have been very drawn to this community because of all these interaction and experiences, more than just what, of course, the general public would see.
Yeah, definitely. That tour of the market with Kira was one of the most fun things that I've done in a while, and it's super interesting. And as you said, very experiential. Being there, smelling the food and touching the food is not something that you can replicate online, at least at this point, maybe another 20 years down the road. But that's very interesting. Mentioning about virality and metrics. So from your personal point of view, what do you look for? After you finish with an event or even with a particular talk or session, how do you think about whether it was successful or how good it was? Because it would be received differently by everybody from their own standpoint, their own base of knowledge, their own reflections, and all that sort of thing. So if we're not looking at numbers, there's not a number scale of how good, quote unquote, good something is out of 10. How do you do that reflection and then take for the next event or the next talk?
Impact measurement for communities, it has always been top of mind for any organizations that's trying to implement a community strategy. So for that, I don't think we have all the answers, but something that we have been, or I personally would see, or that's something that when that happens, I'm like, okay, yes, we did a good job this year, would be whether is it our community, and that means speakers, volunteers, or community that are seeing us the first time, wanting to contribute that as they're going through a program. For example, our speakers like here, because he felt like our community of volunteers were giving him so much, right, from advice, supporting him. And he was touched by how we put up the whole show for our community audiences on that day. At the end of the day, can I cook for you guys? Can I just make play for you guys? And to me, that's act of wanting to contribute back, not just, of course, food, but content and wanting to work together and staying through with us. That makes me feel like, yes, there's something intrinsic, right?
Yeah, so then on the other side of the coin from that, because again, we talked about like lots of different formats and like you do a lot of testing and trying new things, right? So I'm sure over the years, there's been some cases where things maybe didn't do as well as you'd hope. You didn't have as many people attend as you planned for, or something didn't work out. How do you deal with like feeling like things weren't as good as you wanted them to be or as they could have been?
I think you will agree with me. Our team of volunteers are like all perfectionists in their own way. They're obsessed about like the craft of events and programs. So actually, I wouldn't see it as things that don't work out, because things will never ever work out the way we imagine it to be. But I think it's like how we try and problem solve and troubleshoot along the way. Maybe one of the things that was very significant for us was when we were all doing in-person activation and community engagement. And of course, when the whole going digital happened, we were one of the teams that were affected, because we spoke about human connection. And then when COVID happened, the whole pandemic, that was totally cut off. And then I recall we were in Zoom and we helped how to connect. We don't know how to connect as a team. So what do we do? And the solution to it was, let's go on live stream. And this was before any of SOPs and processes, the whole awakening of the digitalization. And I recall our team back then just called random people and asking, is there anybody that knows how to do live stream? And I remembered our first live stream was put together really in a matter of like 1 week. And we even live streamed. So we went live on full digital on live the day Singapore had our circuit breaker. And so much so that the invited guest was someone from Wuhan, who just got out from, they just ended their lockdown. We started our circuit breaker. Because one of the questions that we were curious about is, how do you survive a circuit breaker of staying at home? So that was the question that it was burning in all of us. And we found a friend through all our TEDx contacts. She's a TEDx organizer in Wuhan. And we're like, can you tell us more? And then she's like, how are we going to do live stream with videos and all the firewalls and stuff? Right. And then, so our volunteer, Nestor, found this guy called Jit that brought home a whole equipment kit that could have live stream mixer abilities. And we just made that work in a week. So of course it wasn't like perfect, right? And like things wouldn't work. It's not the live stream now where there are softwares, there's all these things available. And we were just hustling and trying to make it work. And to me, like I said, right, the German method more, was that a perfect program? No, definitely not. But the whole journey of getting there, just because we wanted to try and error and experiment with something that all of us had no understood, that has always been the spirit, which is always very fun to watch for every event, because every single event, something will go wrong.
All right. One final question for you. And I think it might be interesting because it sounds like you are at an interesting stage in your life when you're considering different things. If I talk to you again in 5 years, what would you like to be able to tell me has happened from now until then that would make you feel like you've been successful during that time?
5 years, must we chase success? That's my first question. Must we chase success? What would success look like? Right? What would success mean? Because 5 years later, I definitely would want to know what I've grown or developed and how different I am. Yeah, I think that's it. And if you asked me this 5 years ago, would I have known, or even 10 years ago, would I have known that I would dive into this whole community building work? The answer would be no. To even be able to be speaking in public, it's also a no. But I think passion got me here. So I would love to see how passion would get me 5 years later. And I think one through line of what, or at least that's on top of my mind or to-do list, it is always doing something different and doing things that's very uncomfortable. I think that has been what my goal has been for the last 2 years, doing things that's vastly different so that I'm pushing myself out there to be in difficult and uncomfortable situations. So I think that would be success, like, I guess, for me, 5 years later, is I become a vastly different self. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Thank you. So thanks very much, Vivian, for being with me here today. It was great to talk to you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, talk to you later. Thank you for listening to Before We Get There with your host, Nicholas Braman. Please like and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Before We Get There Podcast. New episodes are released every other Thursday morning. See you next time.